Scary story about school ghosts.
The whispers of Blackwood High. The old stone walls of Blackwood High stood like silent sentinels against the relentless march of time. Generations of students had passed through its hallowed halls, their laughter and youthful energy once echoing in its corridors. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, a chilling secret lay dormant, a darkness that had begun to stir with the waning of the sun and the lengthening of shadows. Blackwood High wasn't just a school. It was a haunted fortress, a prison of echoes where the restless spirits of the past still roamed. The year was 1998. Sarah Jenkins, a bright-eyed and eager student with a thirst for knowledge, found herself at the heart of this eerie institution. She'd always been drawn to the mysteries of the unknown, and the whispers of Blackwood High had piqued her curiosity from the moment she stepped through its grand oak doors. The rumors, of course, were plentiful. The spectral figure of a former headmaster who stalked the headmaster's office, the weeping woman who haunted the girls' restroom on the second floor, and the chilling tales of a boy named Daniel, whose laughter still echoed in the empty theater. Sarah wasn't alone in her interest. Her best friend, Michael Davies, a skeptical yet loyal soul, was equally fascinated, albeit in a more cautious manner. He preferred fact and figures, logic and reason, but even he couldn't deny the unsettling atmosphere that permeated the school. Then there was Emily Carter, a brooding artist, with a talent for capturing the unseen. She claimed to see fleeting glimpses of the spirits, their forms shimmering at the edges of her vision. The three friends formed an unlikely alliance, united by their shared fascination with the paranormal. They started their own investigation, armed with flashlights, notebooks, and a healthy dose of trepidation. Their first foray took them to the headmaster's office, a room that seemed to radiate an icy chill, even on the warmest days. The portrait of Headmaster Abernathy, a stern-faced man with piercing eyes, hung on the wall, and Sarah swore she caught his gaze following her every move. As they searched, they found nothing but dust and silence. Michael, ever the pragmatist, pointed out the lack of evidence. "It's just an old building, Sarah. The wind probably rattles the windows, and our imaginations do the rest." But Emily had a different story. "I felt him here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. A presence, angry and cold. Their next investigation led them to the second-floor girls' restroom, the epicenter of the weeping woman's alleged hauntings. The air in the restroom was heavy, thick with a sense of sorrow. The stalls were vandalized with crude graffiti, and the mirror was cracked, reflecting a distorted image of their faces. As they stood there, a faint sound, like a muffled sob, echoed through the tiled space. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She glanced at Emily, who was frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Michael, despite his skepticism, couldn't deny the chilling sound. "Yeah," he admitted, his face pale. "Sounds like someone's crying." Suddenly the lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. A cold gust of wind swept through the restroom, and the sobbing intensified, growing louder and more desperate. Sarah fumbled for her flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. Emily gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "She's here," she stammered. Then a whisper, seemingly right in Sarah's ear. "He took her from me." The friends scrambled back, stumbling over each other in their haste. They managed to find their way out of the restroom, their hearts pounding in their chests. They didn't speak for the rest of the evening, each lost in their own private terror. Driven by their shared experience, they delved deeper into the history of Blackwood High. They scoured the school archives, poring over old yearbooks and newspaper clippings. They learned of a tragic event that had occurred decades ago, a scandal that had been swept under the rug. A young teacher, Miss Eleanor Blackwood, had been murdered in the very girls' restroom they'd investigated. Her death was ruled a suicide, but whispers of foul play had persisted. The headmaster at the time, the aforementioned Abernathy, had been linked to the case, but no evidence was ever found to bring him to justice. They also discovered the story of Daniel, a gifted student who had been the star of the school's theater program. He had disappeared one night, leaving behind a distraught family and a string of unanswered questions. Rumors suggested he had become involved with something darker, something that had led to his untimely demise. The more they uncovered, the more convinced they became that the spirits of Blackwood High weren't just legends. They were the remnants of real people, trapped in a cycle of pain and anguish. The school was haunted, not by a vague sense of dread, but by the echoes of tragedy and injustice. One moonless night, armed with their knowledge and a newfound resolve, they returned to the school, determined to confront the spirits and uncover the truth. They started in the theater, the location of Daniel's alleged disappearance. The stage was empty, bathed in the cold light of the moon filtering through the windows. As they stood there, a faint sound of laughter, both youthful and melancholic, echoed through the empty auditorium. The temperature dropped, and shadows danced on the walls. They felt a presence, a sense of overwhelming sadness. "Daniel," Sarah called out, her voice trembling. The laughter stopped. Then, a voice, thin and ethereal, answered, "They took everything." They saw him then, a translucent figure, his youthful face etched with grief, standing on the stage, his eyes fixed on an unseen point in the audience. He began to reenact a scene from a play, his movements jerky and unnatural, his voice a mere whisper that seemed to emanate from every corner of the theater. "Who took everything?" Michael demanded, but the ghost of Daniel ignored him. He continued his performance, lost in his own personal tragedy. Then Emily gasped, pointing towards the back of the theater. "Look!" Standing in the shadows, a figure emerged. A tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes. It was Headmaster Abernathy. A sinister smile played on his lips as he watched Daniel, his form flickering slightly. He raised a skeletal hand, and the light around Daniel began to fade. As Daniel's spirit began to disappear, the theater seemed to shake with an unspoken fury. Then, in an instant, Abernathy's figure was gone as well. "He took her." Daniel's whisper faded into the darkness. They were terrified, but they were also emboldened by their newfound knowledge. They knew what had to be done. They had to find out what happened to Eleanor Blackwood and bring the truth to light. They moved on to the second-floor girls' restroom. As they entered, the air was again cold and heavy. The weeping began again. The mirror, now more cracked than ever, seemed to ripple. Sarah began to see the images too, barely at first. She saw fragments of memory. A passionate kiss, a lover's argument, a jealous rage, a shadowy figure, a heavy object, the horrified face of Eleanor. As the vision cleared, they saw her, the weeping woman. A young woman with long black hair, her face hidden by her hands. She was translucent, her form flickering in and out of existence. Her sobs were heart-wrenching, filled with a grief that seemed to consume the entire room. "Why?" Sarah pleaded, her voice choked with emotion. "What happened to you?" The woman slowly lowered her hands, revealing her face. It was Miss Blackwood. Her eyes, filled with despair, met Sarah's. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a whisper of a sob emerged. Then, from the shadows, Abernathy appeared once more. He moved towards Eleanor, his face contorted with rage. "You should have kept your mouth shut," he hissed. "No one was supposed to know." He raised his hand, and a force of negative energy swept through the room. Eleanor's form began to dissolve. "We won't let you," Michael shouted, his voice filled with defiance. Emily, spurred by a sudden rush of inspiration, pulled out her sketchbook and began to draw frantically, channeling her emotions into the strokes of her pencil. She sketched the faces of Eleanor and Abernathy, drawing on the power of the spirits to materialize a portal. The drawing began to glow, a strange light emanating from its paper surface, and in that glow, a spectral image of the headmaster appeared. He stood over a weeping Eleanor, a blood-red hand raised to strike. In her drawings, Emily had captured the moment of Eleanor's murder, an action that could not be changed. As the vision played out, the ghosts of the school grew restless. Abernathy's form began to shudder, struggling to hold his form. As he began to fade, Sarah had an idea. "You can't keep holding on." She used the flashlight. She shone it toward the spectral drawing, which the ghost of Abernathy was struggling to leave, as the memories of his death and his deeds played out again and again. The light beam caught the ghost of the headmaster, and with the combined power of their wills, the light became even stronger. The ghost of Abernathy screamed, a blood-curdling wail that echoed through the school. The light was stronger than the ghost, and with one final scream, he vanished from the drawing. The drawing then fell to the floor. The image of the headmaster's murderous acts faded. With Abernathy gone, the other ghosts gained a new sense of freedom. Daniel's laughter no longer seemed sad. He held his head up, no longer lost in his memories. Eleanor's weeping ceased. She looked at Sarah and smiled. Finally, they were free, able to pass on. The last place they went was the headmaster's office. After a final search, Sarah found a hidden compartment in the desk. Inside, she found a series of letters. The letters detailed an affair between Headmaster Abernathy and Miss Blackwood. In them were threats and accusations. The truth was out, and the spirits were freed. They had solved the mystery. They had brought justice to the past. They had brought peace to Blackwood High. But as they walked out of the school, the air was still cold. The whispers of Blackwood High didn't completely disappear. The echoes remained. Sarah, Michael, and Emily continued to feel a presence, a lingering sense of the past, but it was no longer one of fear. Blackwood High remained haunted, a testament to the tragedies that had occurred within its walls. But now, instead of fear, it was infused with hope. The spirits were at peace, and the truth had been revealed. The school, once a prison of echoes, was now a sanctuary, a place where the past could be remembered and the future could be built, even if the past could never truly be forgotten. The end.
Hollow Creek High was an ordinary school, nestled between dense woods and an ominous, crumbling old mansion that had been abandoned for decades. The townspeople spoke of strange occurrences surrounding the mansion, but to the students, it was merely a backdrop, a ghostly reminder of the past that seemed harmless enough. However, as the school year progressed, whispers of something darker began to circulate. It was late October, and Halloween was approaching. The air was filled with excitement as students planned parties, costumes, and haunted house attractions. Among them were Lily, a curious girl with an adventurous spirit, and her friends, Jake, the class jokester, Sarah, the pragmatic one, and Daniel, the skeptic. They often gathered after school to hang out in the library, where old records of the town's history caught Lily's eye. One rainy afternoon, while rummaging through dusty old books, Lily discovered a faded journal tucked away on a shelf. Its cover read "The Lost Secrets of Hollow Creek," and as she opened it, the musty smell filled the air. The pages told a chilling tale of a tragic incident that had occurred in the mansion long ago. A girl named Elizabeth had vanished without a trace, and locals believed her spirit roamed the woods, longing for release. Intrigued, Lily shared the story with her friends the next day. "We should investigate the mansion," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Jake, always up for an adventure, agreed, while Sarah and Daniel exchanged skeptical glances. "Come on, it's just an old story," Daniel shrugged. But eventually, they all agreed to venture out to the mansion that Halloween night. As darkness fell, they armed themselves with flashlights and set off, laughter echoing in the night air. The mansion loomed before them, its windows dark like soulless eyes. The front door creaked open slightly, as if inviting them in. "After you, brave Daniel," Jake joked, nudging his friend forward. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and the dim light from their flashlights revealed remnants of a forgotten time. They groped their way through the furniture, shadows dancing around them. Suddenly, Sarah paused, her face paling. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Everyone fell silent, straining to listen. A faint sound echoed through the halls, a girl's laughter, soft and haunting. "It's just the wind," Daniel said, trying to sound convincing, but his voice trembled slightly. They pressed deeper into the mansion, navigating through rooms filled with forgotten relics. As they explored, they stumbled upon a grand staircase that spiraled into darkness. Lily's curiosity got the better of her, and she called out, "Let's check upstairs." Reluctantly, they ascended the steps, the wooden stairs creaking under their weight. At the top, they found a long hallway lined with closed doors. One door at the end of the hall stood ajar, a flickering light visible within. "Let's see what's inside," Lily said, her heart racing. Pushing the door open, they entered a dust-covered room illuminated by the ghostly glow of an old chandelier. In the center of the room stood a full-length mirror, its surface cloudy with age. As they approached, the atmosphere shifted, and a sudden chill swept through the air. "Guys, I don't feel so good," Jake said, rubbing his arms as a shiver ran down his spine. "Maybe we should turn back." But Lily was transfixed by the mirror. As she glanced into its depths, she gasped. A figure stood behind her, a girl in a pale white dress, her hair cascading down like shadows. Screaming, Lily turned around, but there was no one there. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, concern etched on his face. I saw her, right there. Lily pointed at the mirror, but the reflection showed only their terrified